Remember, in the previous lessons we discussed that a person living in society with others does not have unlimited freedoms. Every right holder also has a duty to respect the rights of others. Moreover, the state has the obligation to create conditions for every group in society to enjoy all their rights to the fullest extent. This requires the state to balance different interests. For this purpose, human rights law allows states to place limitations on the enjoyment of rights. However, the state does not have unlimited power to restrict the enjoyment of rights. Human rights law requires states to follow certain conditions. These conditions in general are: first, any limitation on the enjoyment of rights must satisfy the principle of legality, that is, the limitations must be prescribed by law. According to well-established jurisprudence, such law must be clear and precise so as not to give unfettered discretion to the law enforcement agencies. Second, the restrictions must have a legitimate aim in a democratic society. Restrictions can only be imposed for purposes mentioned in the international treaties. According to internationally recognized principles, limitations on rights may be imposed to protect the interests of national security, that is, to protect the existence of the nation or its territorial integrity or political independence against force or threat of force; public safety, that is, to protect against the danger to the safety of persons, to their life or physical integrity, or serious damage to their property; public health, that is, to protect against serious threat to the health of the population or individual members of the population; public morals, that is, to maintain respect for the fundamental values of a pluralist democratic society; public order, which is defined as the sum of rules which ensure the functioning of society or the set of fundamental principles on which the society is founded; and rights and freedoms of others in a democratic society. Third, the restrictions must respect the principle of necessity and proportionality. The restrictions placed on the exercise of rights by the individual must be necessary for meeting the legitimate purposes. Further, the impact of such restrictions must be proportional to the interest it seeks to protect. Thus, such restrictions should be carefully designed to meet the objective and must impair the enjoyment of the right to only that extent which is necessary, and must not be arbitrary, unfair, or based on irrational considerations. The Human Rights Committee, that's the UN mechanism having the mandate to monitor the implementation of the ICCPR, in its jurisprudence has clarified the scope of such limitations. It has stated that limitations on the exercise of rights are in the nature of exceptions to the norms, and thus the nature of limitations should not be such that they threaten the substance of the right itself. For example, the state, in the interests of public order and rights and freedoms of others, may impose some limitations on the right to peaceful assembly. In this regard, the state, in order to protect interests of public safety and order, makes a legislation that requires individuals or groups to notify the specified authorities of their intent to hold an assembly. The law further explains that after receiving such notification, the law enforcement agencies would take the measures required to protect public safety, law and order, and rights and freedoms of all persons. Let's examine this limitation against the conditions described above. Principle of legality. There is law that provides for such limitation. The legal provision is clear. Thus, this condition is satisfied. Legitimate aim. The law prescribing the limitation has been enacted to meet the interests of public safety and order. These are legitimate grounds under the international human rights law. Necessity and proportionality. This condition is also satisfied as the requirement of notification is necessary for law enforcement agencies to plan the measures that need to be taken to protect public safety, rights of the protesters, and rights and freedoms of others who are not participating in the protests. Moreover, the limitation is proportional as it does not threaten the exercise of the right in any manner. However, if the law requires that groups have to take prior permission from the prescribed authorities and the law gives the prescribed authorities discretionary power to refuse grant of permission, then such measure may not be considered proportional because by giving power to the authorities to refuse permission to hold peaceful assemblies, the measure threatens the freedom to hold assemblies itself. And the measure is not carefully designed and gives broad discretionary powers to the authorities. Remember, derogations of obligations are different from that of limitations. Limitations on rights are measures that restrict the enjoyment of rights and are applicable at all times. Limitations may be placed only on some rights. A state in extraordinary situations such as that of public emergency, which threatens the life of the nation, may derogate from its obligations with respect to some rights. However, there are certain rights that are absolute, and these rights cannot be suspended even during a public emergency. Also, no limitations can be placed on such rights.